Hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about creating new users using Firebase using email and password. Let's begin by making our sign up view model file in our view model folder. Click new file. Make sure it's a Swift file. Next, sign up view model. We'll move our state variables to our view model file. First, we'll say class sign up view model conforms to observable object, and then we'll define our variables. Now they won't be a state, they should be a published property. By the way, I just used option and click. So you can select multiple items doing that. Published. We'll make an empty initializer and we'll make a function for registering and a validate function just like we did in login. And before we move on, we'll use the variables inside our view model inside our view. We'll simply go to our view. We should have an error, yes. So we'll make a new variable, which is a state object, private, var, view model, sign a view model. And we'll replace these variables with the ones inside our view model by doing view model dot name, view model dot email, view model dot password, and view model dot confirm password. Okay, I have made them private. You should not make them private. So we are using our variables inside our view model in a view now. Let's also say that when we click our sign up button, the view model dot register button is triggered, even though it won't do much right now. So we'll come back to our view model file and we'll complete. Let's start working with our validate function inside a sign up view model. Let's also make a variable for our error message at published var error message of type string and an empty string. We'll look at the validate function in our login view model and we'll just copy paste the entire function. Now we should edit a few things as we have a few more variables to take care of in a sign up view. Name dot white spaces dot is empty. We are checking for our email. We'll also check whether our password has more than 6 digits or not. We can do that by simply doing var password dot count. Let's say longer than 6, else we'll pass on an error message stating enter or password length should be greater than 6 and we'll return false. We'll also check if our password and our confirmed password are same. Var password is equal to confirm password, else error message passwords are not matching and we'll return false. Just like we did in a login view, we'll pass this validate function into our register and we'll make this validate function a private since we do not want to access this function anywhere outside our sign up view model file. Guard validate, else we'll simply return. Now that we have validated our name, email, password, and confirm password, we'll sign in using Firebase. We'll simply import Firebase auth, and inside our register function, we can say auth.auth.create user with email. Our email would be email and our password would be password. Now we'll have a closure. We'll do so by doing result, comma, error in guardlet user ID is equal to result user. So basically we are retrieving the user ID from a created user dot uid, else we'll simply return. So we have created our user using email password in Firebase, but we also need to store our user in a Firestore in our database. We'll not store things like password just to make it secure, but we do need to store things like name and email. To do that, we'll first create a model called user. We'll go to our model folder and we'll create a new file. Make sure it's a Swift file. We'll click next and we'll simply call it user, or I'll call it TK user. Now to create our user model, we'll create a struct that would conform to Codable. We'll see later how that helps us in retrieving and submitting documents to Firestore. We'll say struct TK user conforms to Codable, and we'll define the properties of user that we need. Something like let ID be of type string, let name be of type string, let email be of type string, and let joined will store whenever the user was created. Join time interval. So that's our user model done. So now we'll head over to our sign up view model and actually submit this user to our Firebase database, which would be Firestore. Let's go to our sign up view model. Let's import Firebase Firestore. When writing the code of inserting a user in our register function, we'll create a separate private function called insert user, which would insert users into Firebase whenever we call our register function. We'll do that by saying private func create user and user body. The create user function would actually take in a string ID. And now to actually submit this to Firestore, we'll do something like let new user is equal to TK user, and we'll give the values something like ID, name, email, and joined, which would be date dot time intervals as 9070. Basically, this would be the date when the user is created. Let's create a variable which would hold our Firestore. Something like let db is equal to Firestore dot Firestore. Now let's use this db to actually insert our new user that we have created here. Do that by doing db dot collection, and we'll name our collection users. We'll set the document as ID, and now to actually insert our new user into our document. Well, the problem is we can't directly insert our TK user into our Firebase. We need to submit a JSON, and a JSON is kind of like a dictionary. So one way to do that would be set data, and we start defining something like name, and then we give our name. And we could do this for all of our variables inside the TK user, but there are two problems with it. First of all, you need to update it quite frequently as you update the TK user. It's not dynamic. And second, if you have an error in your typo. If you have a typo error, then it breaks your code. We don't want that, right? So instead of manually writing our JSON, what we'll do is we'll use Codable and create an extension on it so that we can save our new user as a dictionary rather than typing the dictionary ourselves. Actually, let's create a new folder. We'll call it extensions, and let's create an extension for Codable. New zip file. We can simply say encodable extension. Okay, if you don't know, Codable has both encodable and decodable. If you're not aware about Codable and encodable, decodable, I recommend you reading the documentation. It's not very hard. It will take you 10-15 minutes to understand this properly. So let's start by actually writing our extension that would help us in converting our new user into a dictionary. We could do something like extension of encodable. We'll name our function as dict and we'll return string and a name. Function body. In our function body, we'll do something like guard let data is equal to an optional try JSON encoder dot encode cell, else we'll return an empty dict. We return a JSON, we'll use JSON serialization, and to do that we'll also use a do catch block or a try catch block. Please make sure you're aware of the do catch and try. So we'll do we'll let JSON is equal to JSON serialization. We'll put a try since we want to catch the errors. Try JSON serialization dot JSON object with the data that we just created as a string any. We'll simply return this JSON or we'll return an empty dict. Now, if we have any errors in our try, we'll simply return an empty dict. Now, this extension that we have created on Codable will actually help us in submitting our new user to Firestore. We can simply go to a sign up view model, come to set data, we'll simply say new user dot as tick, and we have submitted our new user to our Firestore. Okay, editing Krish here. So one thing I forgot to record was actually using a create user function inside a register function. To do that, we'll simply come into our authentication. We'll simply say create user ID and we'll pass in the ID that we just received from a result. And we'll not use a self, we use an optional self. And to do that, we need to write here weak self. We'll do something like weak self. And hopefully that should be it. That's all you need to create a new user. But we have a problem now. Even if we create a new user, our app wouldn't move forward. It would still bring us back to our login view. That's because when we come to our main view, we have no way of checking whether we have a user that is signed in or a user that is created. So we'll solve this issue by creating a new file in our view model. We'll name it, yes, main view model. This file will basically check whether a user is signed in or not. So we'll import a Firebase auth. We'll simply say class main view model conforms to observable object. We'll have an empty initializer, a variable which would hold the current user ID. We can do that by add published var current user ID of type string empty string. We'll also have a variable that will keep track of whether a user is signed in or not in a Boolean value. Something like a public var is signed in of type bool. We'll have return or dot auth. Actually, you need the brackets here. Dot current user not equal to nil. So we'll have a Boolean value whether the current user is signed in or not. Now to get user ID of a current user, we'll use a handler. So we'll create a variable, a private variable handler of type did auth state did change listen handler. We'll make it optional. And now in our initializer, we'll actually use this handler. We'll do something like self.handler is equal to auth dot add shaded change listener. We'll have a listener. We'll press return, or you can double click. We don't really need the we don't really have need for auth user. Let's call it user, and let's simply have self dot current user ID is equal to user ID. Or if you're not logged in, we'll have it as empty. Now to prevent memory leak, we'll actually use weak self. To do that, we'll do self question mark, basically an optional. We'll put a weak self here, and we'll put this entirety of when we are returning a user ID into a current user ID variable inside a dispatch main queue. So dispatch queue dot main dot async. So this is our entirety of a main view model, which basically checks whether a user is signed in or not and returns the current user ID. If the user is not signed in, it would return an empty user ID. So let's go to our main view. Here, now we'll check whether a current user is signed in or not. If the user is not signed in, then only we'll return a login view. To do that, we'll first have a state object, private var called view model. We'll have it as main view model. Now we'll use our variables that we created inside our view model to actually check whether a user is signed in or not. If the user is not signed in, we'll return the login view. If the user is signed in, we'll not return the login view. Instead, we'll return the home page, or we'll make a profile page for now. Let's go to our view. Let's set command in. Make sure it's a SwiftUI view. Next, let's call it profile view, and we'll go back to our main view. Now we'll check if view model dot is signed in, basically using the is signed in boolean type, and we'll do not view model dot current user ID is empty. Then we'll return a profile view. Otherwise, we'll return a login view. Basically, we are checking whether our view model is signed in is true and the current user ID is not empty. So we'll return the profile view. Otherwise, the app will always go on the login view. Now let's actually run this code in our simulator to see whether we are able to create new users and see them in a Firebase console. So I'll hit Command R to build and run our project in a simulator. So now let's check whether we can create a user using email password. Let's go to sign up with email. Let's write our name, Krish. Let's write our email, contact at krishmittal.com. We'll write a password. I will not be. Inside our Firebase console, we can see that a user with the email contact@krishnamittal.com has been created. And in the Firestore database, we should have a collection with users, a document with an email contact at Krishnamittal, the auto-generated ID, the joined, and our name.